And I was so saddened that what was about to happen, and it was going to change everything as I knew it. And life would never be the same again. They could, and hundreds have lost their lives because it's a cartel. It does say in scripture that knowledge will torment us.
Welcome, Kate. It's really good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Sitting here. I've found this quite interesting because I do get distracted. So feel free to just talk. And if I'm not, sometimes when I've listened back to the previous couple, there's a few times where I'm thinking, why haven't I picked up on that? I'm really interested in that. That's a really interesting thing. And I just make a slightly dismissive sort of noise as if I'm not really interested. I suppose I have to concentrate mainly on the painting. And
well, that's quite a skill, your painting. There's people that just sit and interview and they don't even pick up on pertinent points. And that's how you know they haven't done their research.
Yeah, I know that you like to talk.
Allegedly. Yeah, but do I? Do I?
Oh, maybe not.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's that public, that's that persona, isn't it?
I guess
that
so, yeah.
persona that's out on a microphone, but actually it's not the way I live.
Well, that's an interesting point, isn't it? We all have these ideas of...
I don't have a TV.
Of people, especially people that
live
in the public eye.
I'm very quiet. I don't really go out very much, apart from big long walks with the dogs.
Yeah.
I'm not one for socialising. All my friends know, don't invite me to a wedding that's all day because I'm not coming.
Right. Okay.
Unless I can bring my dogs.
Okay.
Yeah, so no, it's interesting, isn't it? People think I would be gregarious, and yeah, I can. For if I do go out, I can, even in the afternoon, but it's not really. I couldn't sustain that. I'd find that very tiring.
Right. Do you find yourself emotionally drained by what confronts you in sort of everyday life?
That's quite interesting. That's a good question with lots of facets to it. When my children were little, and also my mother told me actually from when I was little, back in the day in the 60s, in the early 70s, when people didn't really go to the cinema very often because it was very expensive and it was a luxury. And the theatre, we would occasionally go to the theatre because my dad was a postman.
Right.
So every Christmas at the sorting office, all the children from the postman would have a big party. And it was wonderful. And then we would have another day where all the postman's children in Nottingham would go to the Theatre Royal and watch the pantomime, which was wonderful. I don't think they do it anymore. And but I would always fall asleep at everything, even as a young child.
Right.
And as my children were growing up and I took them to see the pantomime, mostly in Tunbridge Wells at the Assembly Hall, I would fall asleep. I was notorious for it. And the cinema, I used to love taking them to the cinema if it was a rainy day, because I'd have a good kip.
Right.
So I've been known, and it was explained to me once that I started to get tired because of everybody else's energy.
Right.
And so on the days when we would take the children, we had National Trust membership and lots of different memberships. So in the school holidays, I would do an itinerary and I would take my kids out nearly every day. And in the wintertime, I would take them to the museums, the galleries, different things in London, the Cutty Sark. Yeah. But I would always be absolutely drained and exhausted on the train on the way back.
Right.
And I noticed at the rallies in London, the fatigue that I felt, particularly, when you've been on stage for hours.
Yeah.
I would feel the most phenomenal fatigue. And then the next day, it was incredible, the fatigue I felt, like I'd done, a 7-hour hike, which I sometimes do.
Right. Okay.
So
what? How do you counteract that? I know you have faith.
What do I do?
What gives you the energy to sort of fight through that?
I go on Ashdown Forest every day, virtually, and walk. And sometimes I take my shoes off. I always go on my garden every morning with no shoes all year round.
Yeah.
And juice, good food, sleep, quiet, no noise, nobody in my ear, and just myself, me, myself, and I.
Yeah.
What is that? The Holy Spirit,
Yeah, the
the
Holy
Lord, and
Trinity, yeah.
myself. And then you're recharging your batteries. Interesting. I came down here. I got out the car at Churchill Square in Brighton, and I walked through the centre and then walked down this high street. I went into Pret to use the bathroom,
Oh, yeah.
and so many people. And I thought, oh, goodness me, I'm so out of this. I would hate to live in this and do this every day. And I feel exactly the same actually if I go to London.
Yeah.
When you're walking from London Bridge through all of those people rushing, I just think, this is not life. It's not living. This is so unnatural.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't be fooled by the makeup and the earrings today, folks. It's not how I dress the rest of the time. It's a disguise.
So what is it? What does the disguise do for you?
Well, I think when we put on, it's putting on it's putting on that persona, isn't it? It's putting on that persona of, okay, I'm going to impart my knowledge, all the hours I've spent studying. When you all were out there having fun and watching Netflix, actually, I have fun sitting reading. This is now where I'm going to do it, and sadly, we can all testify to it. If you're scrolling through any social media and there's a good-looking fella, you're going to go a bit slower, and the same as my whole life.
Yeah.
I've had a very plain face which paints up nicely, and I got paid for having that plain face and skinny body in my late teens, early 20s, and I modelled it. So I kind of used it to my best advantage.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Plain faces are quite self-deprecating.
Yeah, but it is. If you've
Is
got
that how you see it?
if you've got an aesthetically very plain face, wide apart eyes, nose, the dimensions, that triangle, as you're youthful and young, then it paints up very nicely into whatever you want to paint it to. Whereas if it's a little bit quirkier,
Like a blank canvas.
yeah, it is. Whereas if it's a little bit quirkier, it's a bit more difficult to. It tends to always be one view.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've got a plain, flat face, it becomes very easy. It's multifaceted, isn't it?
Yeah. How do you reconcile that sense of sort of base instincts, like you just mentioned, how we all have these evolutionary, maybe, I'm not sure, not that I'm necessarily a believer in evolution as it's been told, but these kind of innate cultural and psychological habits. How do you sort of marry that with a more spiritual outlook on life?
Well, I don't. It's about 5 questions.
Sorry, it is, isn't it?
That's all right. Well, you talk.
So I get them in, so then I can keep paying.
Well, you talk about evolution. You mention evolution, Darwin's theory of evolution, and the clues in the title.
Yeah.
Theory, and the fact that he was all part of that whole lineage, that lie, that to convince us that we're not perfect, created in the Lord's image.
Yeah.
And that we don't have the abilities that we have and how extraordinary we are. So I think that, but I do think using that word evolution, evolve, who we are fundamentally as children, we still recognise as we get older, that it's still there. We know ourselves very early on. Yeah, but I think,
that's very interesting you said that. Came up exactly the same thing came up with Jackie.
Yeah.
How we feel
the same.
When we look back, we definitely recognise that adult self, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My grandmother was in her 90s when she died, and she outlived several fellas. And her last husband, when she got married, she was in her late 80s. And I was talking to her about love, and she said, it's no different. The love I feel now, that exciting love when I first met him, and then I knew, is no different to the love I felt at age 21.
Right.
And I thought, oh, that's so wonderful, because we're always led to believe that, love is only to be found in the garden of youth, but actually it isn't. It's that again, that multifaceted love, because love is, that desire people mistake for love, but love, of course, isn't. It
Yeah.
grows, and
Yeah.
so the love we have for our children, for our pets, and I think so. Going back to that evolve, we evolve with our life circumstances, with our life's challenges, with our experiences, and one should never downplay anyone else's life experience. If someone's not had children, but they have pets and their pet dies and they're utterly bereft, should we ever, if we've experienced the death of a child, which is profound, should we ever downplay? Because who I am today, sitting in your studio, is somebody very different to who I am when I was first asked to sit for you. Because I've had a life experience which I can now testify that death of a pet is very similar, if that pet is beloved, to the death of one's child. I can say that it is all the same grief.
Right.
The same grief that one goes through, recognised by, I think it was Kubler-Ross, and they identified the different stations, the different things that you go through in grief.
Right.
I could add to it exponentially. So again, yes, I'm saying I could add to it exponentially because of my evolvement as a human being and what I've been through, particularly the challenges of the last 4 or 5 years. So do I think we're all different? I think we are all different, but I think we're all one. I think we all come from source. I wasn't a Christian. Now, I didn't read scripture. I was brought up very much the opposite, almost rude at times, dismissive. And I had a wonderful lady who spoke, I think she spoke 7 or 9 languages, and she had 11 copies of the Bible. And she introduced me to scripture in a period of great anxiety in my life. And it was wonderful.
When was this?
It was, I think, round about 2018.
Okay, fairly recently.
Maybe, yeah. And she had me open she was wonderful. She did the speaking newspaper for the blind. Actually, can I tell her story? It would be wonderful.
Of course you can.
I could do it in a few minutes because
of course
it's
you
the
can.
most
We've got
impressive.
hours.
I love this story, testimony, and it's far more important and should be heard than mine. There was a little place called Loch Mabon in Scotland, and it was the war, and there was a railway inn, and that inn was run by a mother and father and an Aunt Meg, and her husband, and there were several brothers, but I think they were living their own lives and married. And there was a spinster, a lady there that was a spinster in her 30s, and an officer who was a pilot, and his private were billeted at this place during the Second World War in the early 40s.
Yeah.
And they were there for 3 months, and then off they went back to the war, and they were both subsequently killed. Now, the younger one, I believe he was about 22, he was married with no children. Several months later, it became apparent that the spinster in her 30s was pregnant. And they were a Protestant family. And anyone who knows Scotland, in those days, Protestant Catholic, oh my goodness me. Even when I trained as a nurse in Scotland, oh my goodness me.
Yeah.
Never the twain shall meet. And she was married. She was not married. And so she was sent away to have this child. And her sister, who hadn't been able to get pregnant with her husband, wrote to her and said, Auntie Meg said, if you don't come back with that little baby, I will never speak to you again. So she came back with this little girl called Wilhelmina to this place, Loch Mabin, where they were Protestant, and it was in the early 40s, absolutely unheard of to be pregnant. And this little girl was known as the little bastard. And this girl was loved and adored and raised by the grandparents, the aunt, the uncle, the mother, never knowing anything but love and joy. And she went on to be the first woman at St Andrews University to attain a master's degree. And then she went over to Pakistan and India, where she spoke the languages and taught. And then she came back in her 30s because she met a BBC correspondent and she fell in love with his voice. And when they were just having written communication, he was a widower. And I think it wasn't long, it was about 6 weeks later, they had a conversation on the phone and she fell in love with him on the phone. And they married shortly after. And she moved to Tunbridge Wells, where she lived till her 70s, and he was in his 90s when he died. So she was the most amazing human being I've ever met in my life.
Right.
And she introduced me to scripture, and she saved me.
Saved in this, in the Christian sense, or saved
Yeah, it saved me in so many ways.
Yeah.
She taught me that the only thing you should ever throw at anything when all else fails, and actually it should be the first thing, is you throw love at it.
Right.
And that's what we're supposed to do. And as human beings, no matter how awful people think others are, it's not in us to be naturally aggressive and evil. It's actually inbuilt in us to love one another. Romans 13, love thy neighbour as you love yourself. But of course, we become filled, and as many actually psychiatrists and psychologists are now coming out and testifying, even though I read it decades ago, everything else is demonic. It's demonic. It's when you've allowed demons in to you.
When you say everything else, everything other than
evil,
love.
To be full of all those low vibrations, anger, resentment, jealousy, envy, fear, aggression. They all resonate at about 0.2 to 2.2 hertz, PhD study. Whereas love, acceptance, joy resonates at about 108 to 220 hertz. And we know that when we're sick, we get sick in the lower end of those vibrations, which is why, the healing vibrations, the solfeggio tones, why ancient churches, the turrets that were built the way they were, with the acoustics.
Yeah.
Why the windows, the stained glass windows, were put where they were to split the natural light. You want me to get into that?
I haven't heard about the stained glass windows splitting.
It's very interesting. So we're mostly water.
Yeah.
This holy temple is water. We should be at least 86%. We're a bit crispy now because of what's put in our water, the EMFs, the chemicals that we're exposed to, the foods that we eat, the lack of sleep, and so on and so forth. So when light, that red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, when it hits the hydrogen atom, the red will go into the nucleus and supercharge it, and the violet end will hit the electrons and cause it to start spinning. And it's that raises us up into that physical form out of the matrix, as people like to call it. And it's quite incredible that so when you wanted to heal somebody, when two or more gather in his name, in my name, I shall be there in the midst. So you would take them to these places of worship where the light would come in, and you would pray, and that 528 hertz, that prayer, that spoken word, that the word, the sword, Ephesians, put on your full armour of God, and everything is a weapon of defence, but the word, your sword, is most powerful. And it is that will change your holy temple, your water, and that's been shown with the work of Dr. Emoto.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting. Also, Dr. Leonard Horowitz, who I'd like to say, I'll throw his name in.
Oh, yeah.
The friend.
He's a friend of you.
He is.
He's one of the first.
I've interviewed him and I've got his books,
okay.
and I ended up, he gave me the greatest accolade We should never bomb ourselves up. Gave me the greatest accolade on air on TNT, which I'm not going to repeat because it would be
Go on.
vulgar. No, it's so vulgar.
See?
This is his words, not mine. I do not think this is myself, but he said you're the most intelligent woman I've ever come across.
Okay.
You've put it all together.
Okay.
You've managed to put everything together. And I said, that's because I've read all your books. So he was wonderful reading, wonderful. Do get his books. Get them secondhand because they're expensive.
He's been around.
He
for a
was
while,
ahead
hasn't
of the
he?
curve. Everybody that thinks they're out there now as these freedom doctors and freedom fighters,
Yeah.
you're sorry, you're all just plagiarizing, because Dr. Horowitz, even in his book AIDS and Ebola Emerging Viruses, all the documents are in there that in 1970 the Department of Defense was appropriated $10 million over 5 years, that's $2 million a year, to find the most catastrophic thing that the body would not be able to come back against. And they did. They found 70,000 and of this manipulated RNA, not messenger, manipulated, which they then shipped out to over 500 labs, the CDC and the, I think it was the Center for Cancer Research in America. They were two of them. So they shipped it all out. So it was already there. It's all been done. So it's nothing new. So sorry, all you doctors who think you're finding something. You're not. It's all there.
On the 16th of March, cartoonist Bob Moran and football legend Matt Letizia will be appearing at Hope Sussex. Both will be giving talks, and Bob will also be selling his book and taking a cartoon workshop. 1,000 Words will be exhibiting portraits from the series and presenting them to some of the sitters, including Kate Shemirani, Piers Corbyn, Robin Manotti, Mad Mick, and of course Bob and Matt. So grab a ticket from hopesussex.co.uk and make sure you say hello. There are some people within the kind of movement who get quite adamant that there isn't anything out there that can harm us. If talking about this sort of virus, no virus kind of debate that goes on. Do you believe in viruses?
No.
You don't? Okay.
No, that I think it was Dr. James Hildreth stated that viruses and exosomes are one and the same. But of course, if you're a virologist, that's all your years of study straight down the big white pan.
Yeah.
That's very hard for people to accept, isn't it? Because a lot of people, to get an ology after your name or letters, to go through an institution, and they are institutions, and being able to recite like a parrot, your ability to learn whatever they say you've got to learn and recite it. PhD is different. You've got to come up with new stuff, or is it new stuff?
Yeah.
But it's very hard for them to then let go, because you're talking about egos then, right? Talking about something completely different. I was more than happy to scrub RGN and independent nurse prescriber and drop those letters. I couldn't give a rat's ass, really.
Right.
Yeah, I really don't care. You come in with nothing and you go out with nothing, and all of this, in an hour of great need, when you finally realise that it's so unimportant, it doesn't matter. But for some people that are still sort of trapped in that, this is it. This is it. This is all there is. This is it. This is life. They don't want to let go of anything, so they'll hang on to it all, and it's almost like a mental block. So they'll fight to retain the lie.
Why do you think some people struggle to see the temporary nature of our existence?
Because they're afraid. They're afraid. They're afraid because they think that's it. It's very difficult to try and understand the concept of nothingness. So if they believe in nothingness, they think that you come here and you die and you rot and that's it. And we can't possibly be anything other than that. Then imagine, I can't imagine how afraid they must feel in those early hours of the morning when, they've been given a terminal diagnosis and they're, all this bravado. I'm sorry if I offend you, but I'm going to say it anyway. I always think about the Nolans. I'm in the mood for dancing, but not anymore. Lots of them have become sick and had breast cancer. There are lots of them. And and I remember watching one of them. And of course, people say, oh, it's genetic. No, it's not. It's because there's over 10 billion miles of DNA in one genome sequence. There is no such thing as junk DNA. It's just nonsense that you would even think that.
Yeah.
The Creator, the Lord, Yahweh, does not make mistakes.
Yeah, it's like sort of
Those are
dark matter,
upregulated, downregulated based on what we're exposed to, be it physical, psychological, spiritual, emotional, chemical, the rest of it, EMFs. But anyway, they would all live together. They were touring, they were eating the same foods, they were exposed to the same things. So I'm not surprised that they got the same illnesses. And they would have also had that same constitution. Your constitution is set pretty much by the time you're about 35. So if you imagine your bank account and you can keep putting money in till you're 35, but then at 35, you can withdraw money, but you can't put any more in. You can maintain that amount, keep putting back, but you can never go over. So if you've got 50,000 in the bank and you keep withdrawing, eventually it's going to run out. So you have your constitution set. Well, if your constitution is already low because of what you've been exposed to, you're going to get sicker quicker.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, based on the Constitution, what have the eggs that made me were inside my grandmother. So my grandmother conceived my mother, and shortly after my mother was conceived, she had all the eggs that would go on to produce her 3 daughters.
Yeah.
So whatever those eggs were exposed to by my grandmother, and then what they were exposed to by my mother, and then I was born, and then you have about 7 years to try and undo a little bit of anything that would be negative. And this is why you see this running in families. So anyway, going back to the Nolans, I always remember one of them, I think it was Bernie, and she wrote this book, and she was on the front cover bald, I hear a lot of people saying it, I'm going to kick cancer's ass, which basically means you're going to kick your own ass.
Yes.
Which is bizarre because they're your cells. They just want to survive. But your ability to repair that damaged DNA or cause apoptosis, cell death, has been damaged. So I find it very bizarre that one would speak about oneself like that. So I see all these people, and it made me think of her, and then Sally Farmerlow, who was one of the Bond girls.
Okay.
I think she had this illicit encounter with Jonathan Aitken, allegedly.
Okay.
Don't sue me.
Yep.
And she wrote this book called I think it was My Left Boob, and she was diagnosed with breast cancer round about the same time as me. I think it was a lesser grade. And she had a lumpectomy. I do hope I'm doing her her name justice. And then she went on and she had chemotherapy and radiotherapy, but of course I didn't. I refused all of that.
Yeah.
And then she wrote this book, and then ultimately, very quickly actually, I think it was within not even 12 months, she was very sick and she was dying. And she wrote about how in those early hours of the morning, how she felt. And I can remember thinking, that must be you must be so filled with fear when facing that with no faith. Whereas for me, if I think about my final moments, I get butterflies in my stomach. I think, oh my word, I'm going to finally see it. I'm going to be in judgment.
Yeah.
I'm going to see it. And I don't have that fear. I used to as a child, a little girl, I was terrified of death. But not at all now. I mean, I think that's definitely scripture. Definitely my friend Wilma. Definitely.
But, I mean, I think, say someone like Richard Dawkins, who, you hear him and they kind of this idea that we're just here and we're gone and we're kind of meaningless and it's all just the what do they call it? The clock. the watchmaker, the blind watchmaker, is that his book? So, like we're just this sort of thing set in motion. I sort of question whether they actually believe that, because I think if someone actually did fully take that on board and believe that, they would just not get up in the morning. They wouldn't have any kind of motivation to do anything. And the fact that people are out there, I think in a way, would you agree that people are almost in denial of their kind of spiritual nature?
I think it would be very dismissive to say, please forgive me, and I don't mean to be rude to you, especially when you're painting my picture. I think it would be dismissive to be so base as that, for me, to say they're in denial. Because I would have to question, first of all, Dawkins, because like Leonard Huxley, who was related to Aldous Huxley, who we know wrote the book Brave New World. He was a member of the Committee of 300, who taught the man who went as George Orwell at Eton, actually, who plagiarised. His book 1984 was actually plagiarism, but we won't get into that.
Oh, okay.
But I'll save that for another one.
Okay.
But I think these people, it would be interesting, his lineage, to look at his lineage. They are there to try and to deceive us, to make us believe that there is nothing else. And that's what the devil does. And I'm not Bible bashing anybody, trust me, that I do not do. I'm banned from so many churches. And there's not many that I would go to. And one doesn't have to go to one. You just need to get with people who are like-minded and speak about it, and you'll be absolutely buoyed and fed by the Holy Spirit. It's wonderful. But in Ephesians, putting on your whole armour of God, well, the devil comes to lie, cheat, steal and kill. What is the devil? And it's in Quran, they have their word for it. They have in lots of Baha'i, in lots of different scriptures, they have the same thing, entity. And in Christianity, of course, Satan, Lucifer. So he comes to lie, cheat, steal and kill. And this is why we're told to put on our full armour of God, and we're supposed to put on our helmet of salvation. And that is to give us hope and faith. And I think what you were saying is that book and that author, and you said if one was to believe that, they wouldn't get up in the morning. That is to give us fear. And, this is what the devil does. He instills fear in us. So I think it's to rob us of our faith and hope. And then we wouldn't be able to get up in the morning, because what does drive one to get up in the morning is all will be well. Today is a new day. Today I can put right that which I feel that I may not have done when I reflected on yesterday. I may not have done as well as I could. And reflection is such an amazing tool. Don't dwell, but reflect, draw a line, step over it, and have hope and faith that you can do better and it will be better. So I wouldn't want to read that book. I haven't read it.
No.
And now you've told me that. That's something that I would say to everyone: don't read that book.
I just feel that when I hear him speak, and he kind of, for me, sort of represents that whole atheistic movement.
To rob you of your joy.
I just don't buy that he really, and those peddling it, really believe it, because I just think if you did believe it, I don't think you'd be motivated to even write a book. I mean, what's the point? I think deep down we have a kind of inner knowing that there is actually some kind of purpose to our existence, and I think even those people know it. Maybe they're not recognizing it. I suppose that's what I meant by, they're sort of in denial, but maybe they just simply don't recognize it.
I think if he's a bestseller, he knows exactly what's going on, and his book will be there for a reason. Just turning that, the pharmaceuticals companies choose what drugs will make it to market. They choose what will be published in the rags, the peer-reviewed studies in their rag magazines. They choose who, that's my pat on the shoulder, and let's peer review one another, because we're all second to God because we've got ologies and letters after
Yeah.
our names. And we can fill a piece of A4 with big, big words that the peasants won't understand, whereas you can translate it and fit it all into just one side, which I like to do. And they're for everybody. Some of the best people to understand this is the man in the street, because he's not been indoctrinated.
Sure, yeah.
That's how amazing each of you are. You're fabulous, created in the Lord's image. So I think, the pharmaceutical companies get to choose what gets published. They get to choose who gets the top jobs. They get to choose those people in the top jobs, then choose who comes after them. So when that money goes out to universities and to labs to do trials, even if that particular person in that position of authority can refute the hypothesis of that drug, should they do it, they'll lose their funding, they'll lose their job. They could, and hundreds have lost their lives because it's a cartel. And I don't believe that publishing is any different, just like Hollywood or the media. I don't know why people would think that you would have so much falsehood and deceit in certain facets of life, but not in others.
Yeah.
It's all the same. I mean, oh dear, dare I? The Tate Gallery. Please do go there if you're feeling glum. Go there with somebody that makes you laugh, that you feel joy with, and rock around that place and have a good laugh because, or as they say down in the South, a laugh. I've never seen such crap with people standing there.
Well, yeah. Don't get me started on
It's
the nature of
nonsense.
the modern art movement. Is
Yeah,
just,
an unmade bed. Come on, Tracy. I could have shown you those with my kids growing up. In fact, I went to Tate with my children and I saw some very disabled people being wheeled in, very disabled, being wheeled into it with their carers. And my daughter was quite young at the time. And she said to me, "That must be so awful, Mummy, because they can't leave if they want to." And I said, yeah. And I said, "What do you think of that?" She said, "It's rubbish." I said, "Oh, let's go round and look at rubbish stuff then." Anyway, it was we had a hoot. I'm sure there'll be people watching this say, "How dare she?" Well, I dare because I got a grade A for my O-level art.
I don't think there will be many people. I think the vast majority of people...
Nobody dare say it. Let's go through the Tate and let's give some awards. Anyway, probably somebody would say, actually, was there not a pile of elephant excrement? There was. That was art. Art is whatever you say it is.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When I was at university studying art, I think there was a guy called Manzoni, and he literally candied them. And that was, that was lauded, and that was...
Because it's sensationalist. So do you believe...
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think art's infiltrated?
Oh, God, massively, yeah.
Well, there we are then.
Oh, God, yeah.
There we are then, absolutely.
Yeah.
And everybody knows the casting couch and all the models now.
Yeah.
Victoria's Secret's models, they're all shouting about it's all the same. I actually modelled. I was with an agency.
What was your experience
in the 80s? It was nightclubs were floor to floor with footballers and the models. And then they came together. And I saw Premier footballers snorting coke.
Yeah.
I can honestly say, no, I haven't. I have had cannabis oil. That's it. There's nothing on me.
Yeah.
No dirt on me. So quite interesting. But again, that's ego, isn't it? It's ego. It's believing themselves to be something they're not, giving them lots of money. Then they drive a fast car. They have a fancy pants watch. The women have designer handbags. I've been through all that, done all that. It's just so boring and rubbish, because when you finally come down to taking you back to that circle of life, those final hours when you finally realise none of it matters.
Of course,
It's very sobering of the heart.
Download Liberty, the new single from the Blockheads with incredible artwork by legendary freedom artist Bob Moran. Out now on Defiance Records. Would you say that with life there's an element to which we have to almost be ignorant of the big picture for us to reap the benefits of this temporary show, or however you how would you look at it? What is the, we're obviously detached from meaning to a large extent. What's the meaning behind that in your opinion? Why are we sort of lost? Well, let me put it another way then. Why are we?
No,
why are so many people?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
Why
okay.
are we so lost? It was beautifully put.
Okay.
A great question. That's such a good book title. For all of your pictures and your interviews should all go
Okay.
into a book.
Okay.
Why are we so lost? Great title. Well, it does say in scripture that knowledge will torment us. And it does.
Okay.
It does. In 2020, in February, when I realised what they were about to do, and I was on local radio every month as their health expert, not my title, it was theirs. They gave me that title. And I covered about COVID-19 and Wuhan, Wuhan being the test city for 5G, which it was from the autumn of 2019. And I covered as well that all vaccines in China were mandatory from December of 2019. I covered that. And I got into loads of trouble, and that interview ended up having a couple of million views worldwide, and the rest is that's how I sort of ended up being notorious.
Right.
But I remember then sleeping downstairs on my sofa, this corner sofa in the family room. Sounds terribly posh, doesn't it, a family room? Because it has 3 windows all the way around, and I could see the sun come up. And I needed to see the sun come up every day. So for 3 months, I slept in my clothes. I didn't even wash my face at night, wash my mask off. And I just slept there. And I remember my daughter being terribly upset that I was sleeping downstairs, but it was because I knew everything I'd read about in all of my ex-husband's books was right here, right now, upon us in my children's lifetime. And I was so saddened that what was about to happen, and it was going to change everything as I knew it. And life would never be the same again. And that my parents, I actually remember saying to my mum on the phone, because she was born in 1944, you've had the best life. And now we're in another cycle, and it's going to become so horrible for my children.
Right.
And I think at that point, I changed again. Another life experience that changed who I was from when I realised I had an epiphany, something that happened to me after my friend Wilma, she died.
Right.
I couldn't save her. And how bereft I felt and guilty I felt. And I had this incredible moment where I was crying out, I want to believe and I don't. I want to believe and I don't. Please show me it's true. And then something happened and then something else happened all within a few days.
Okay.
And then you could not convince me the other way. So whereas I didn't believe and you couldn't convince me, to now I believe so well, I think, how can you not believe it?
Right.
So I changed again and that knowledge. And then over the last 4 years, I've had profound times of sadness. Watching what's been done to myself and my family. When my son who went to Eton and then at LSE and the whole world watched, my son being used as he was.
My name is Sebastian Shemirani. I'm 23 years old. I live in Hong Kong. I grew up in the UK with my mum, who is the UK's biggest COVID conspiracy theorist.
No vaccine's ever been proven safe and no vaccine has ever been proven effective.
We know that's not true.
Please allow me to answer. So all of these things that again gave me a life experience and again gave me intense sadness. And each of them has I possibly am not, I can't articulate this very well. And for anyone who's watching this interview, please forgive me that I'm going to put it in very crude and well-used terms. It's because I don't know how to articulate it, so do forgive me. But it was like the taking away the layers of an onion. If you remember back to your grade 7, year 7, where you took a membrane of an onion and put it under the microscope.
Yeah, we did do that actually.
Everybody did it.
We did do that.
Everybody did it. You took away the thinnest membrane,
and
put it under a microscope, and you saw that this membrane was so fantastic with all these cells. So it was like, it's been like this constantly peeling away of membranes until now. I can honestly tell you that I can remember going to see Tom Jones and being bored stiff after 10 minutes in the O2, but being more interested in looking around at the audience, because it was like being on the set of Cocoon.
Yeah.
I've never seen so many old people having such a good time. And sorry, not Tom Jones. That was Barry Manilow.
Oh, okay.
Barry Manilow. Then I came down to Brighton and I saw Tom Jones. And again, I was bored stiff and kept going to the bathroom. And then I was impressed with, it was just before Christmas, with the place being full of ladies in sparkly sequined strappy numbers. And they were having a great time and I wasn't. I'm getting to the point. I'm rambling. And then I went to see Madness. And I do like Woody. So Woody, and I know I have met Woody since then. He came
Which
down.
one's Woody?
The drummer.
Oh, okay.
Didn't take the shot.
That's right.
Yeah, he came down to Brighton to see me when I did stop them from having that vaccine sent the day they were opening it for 18-year-olds. The old Top Shop. Shame on them.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, 4 hours I was on a microphone.
Yeah.
And anyway, they said I was banned from the shopping mall forever. 2 weeks later, I was back shopping. I was like, yeah, I told you. Yeah. Don't make promises you can't keep. But anyway, so I went to see Madness and I went with a well-known actor. And we stood right in the middle. And I was bored.
Right.
After about 10 minutes. And I remember all those tracks because that was my era. And their band were going for it. They were having such a good time. And so were the audience. And they were all dressed from that era. So I went to the bathroom and sat in the bathroom on the toilet for ages, with the lid down, texting. And then I went outside and I stood on the periphery with my back against the wall. And I watched a man for a good hour dressed in a suit, dancing this incredible dance. That gave me joy.
Okay.
But anyway, all of these things, my point is, they don't give me joy. What gives me joy is walking on the forest and watching my 2 chihuahuas when I first let them out and they suddenly go mad because they're out for a walk and we go for hours. And one will then wait for the other and then they run together and they're having the best time. And there's always cattle up there this time of year with their babies and the mummies are feeding their babies. And there's sometimes sheep up there, so we have to be careful. And that gives me joy. That gives me joy. I was walking the other day and I could see all the mushrooms starting to come out.
Yeah.
And walking along the riverbank, and I notice all the trees are all feeding the other trees. Trees feed one another with their roots. But watching the changing seasons, that gives me joy. And then I like to touch the trees and touch the leaves and touch everything. And I'll take my gloves off and touch everything as I go along. Actually, that earths you as well. But that gives me joy. Going to anyone in the south, going to Seven Sisters, right up on the top of the cliffs. It's incredible. It's incredible. Being in Brighton in Brighton City, that's not really giving me a lot of joy. But I'm here because you're painting, which is a great honour and privilege.
We can pretend we're somewhere else.
No. Listen, it's a great privilege when someone wants to paint your old face. And I love being older. But that's a privilege as well, because most of you ain't going to get there. Not if the current government has their way.
Yeah.
So yeah, in a nutshell, what gives me joy? That moment when you get into bed at night, I have my feet on an earthing mat, and then I take it away every now and again for a week. That moment when you get into bed and you go, and you're tired, and it's so wonderful that you're in bed. I always take a cup of peppermint tea to bed with me. And I was dressed for bed, especially in winter. I always sleep with the window open, so I put socks on, but then I had to take them off. Got my earthy one, t-shirt and a sweatshirt and jogging bottoms, and I look, my hair on top of my head curled round, and I'm embalmed.
You're painting the picture.
In tallow. Yeah. I'd slither straight out. Well, it's me and the dogs and the cat, Gloria Gaynor. It's joyful.
Yeah.
And I always fall asleep reading. Simple things. Do you go to Seasons?
In Lewis?
No. That's owned by
in Forest Road?
The one in Forest Road. They literally kept me alive for 2 years. They delivered everything I needed for the full Gerson therapy, the 13 juices a day.
Okay.
So then John, who owned it, who's a Morris dancer, he's a Morris dancer. He Morris dances. His son took it over, Robin. And I've done some filming in there for What the Doctors Don't Tell You magazine.
Okay.
That was one of 14 magazines that wanted, the only one that wanted to hear how I'm alive and well almost 12 years on after a diagnosis in 3 peer-reviewed studies said that I had a 20% chance of surviving 2 years and 0 surviving 5. But no one else wanted to publish it, just What the Doctors Don't Tell You.
And what's the Doctors Don't Tell You?
It's the, I think it goes out to, is it 14 countries or more? It's a magazine which is everything's in it, what the doctors don't tell you.
Okay.
It's a great magazine.
So that's old school printed media.
It's great, and they it's all in there. It's a fantastic magazine. Big shout out to them. And they sent their photographer and their journalist did the thing, and they did a really good story with everything. I actually bought the pictures. They were great.
You mentioned the Gerson. Did you do the liver juices as well? As part of it.
If you're planning on putting this on YouTube, you will have to edit this bit out.
Okay, I'm interested more just at my own.
But you can put it on every other platform.
Okay.
But now, if you mention anything about Dr. Gerson, they will literally remove you and your channel.
Okay.
And I know, because I know the clinics have been removed.
Wow.
So I did the full Gerson therapy for 2 years, and then I continued with a lesser one that I even do today. So I still do coffee enemas today.
Okay.
So I did 5 coffee enemas a day. I did 13 freshly pressed juices a day. I did the salt-free, sugar-free, fat-free vegan diet for the first 6 weeks, and then thereafter the 200 mils of yogurt. I did it for 2 years. I never wavered. I drove 90 miles a day with 4 children to get them to school and their clubs. And I did over 100 supplements a day. I did a castor oil enema and drank the castor oil twice a week. I did high-dose vitamin C orally for 2 years. I did vitamin B17 tablet protocol for 2 years. And I did mistletoe injections into my abdomen for 1 year.
Wow.
And I did not waver.
Wow.
I did it to the T.
With diet, people say, I can't afford to eat well. And then they'll go down the pub and spend 20 quid on beer.
And they've got a phone and they smoke over 5,000 chemicals in cigarettes, whereas get yourself some organic tobacco and some organic leaf, and there's loads of studies that smoking 4 cigarettes a day is good for you.
I've heard that.
And the Navajo Indians and the cowboys, the reason they chew tobacco is if any of their livestock or their countrymen were bitten by snakes, they would put a poultice on it. And it would the nicotinic acid would bind to the receptor sites and displace the venom, and they would recover. And this is why the cowboys chew tobacco and will spit on wounds, and this is why they will smoke. And this is why a lot of smokers don't get sick when you have live bioweapons put out.
Yeah, wasn't there a link between smoking and so-called COVID?
There is, and it was Dr. Brian Ardis and his wife, who I met because I spoke at the Red Pill Expo, and I met them there, and they're wonderful. I've got their telephone numbers, private numbers. But anyway, and I shared the study on where they showed when they gave this to people who were suffering from long COVID, which is really like radiation.
Yeah.
And a lady as well that lost her hearing. She was actually a doctor, and she chewed nicotine gum for 10 minutes 4 times a day and got her hearing back after a year. And all of these people that were suffering from these symptoms that they refer to as long COVID, but they're not, their toxicity. They recovered and remained recovered. So a lot of drugs have got venom in them. That's how they work. And this is how, like the red spotted fantastic mushroom that you see.
Oh, fly agaric,
The poison from it makes you feel like you're dying. It drops your blood pressure through the floor. So it must stimulate your vagus nerve.
Yeah.
So they put venoms in things deliberately. And I think Brian Ardis was telling me, please do check it. I haven't checked it. He told me that glyphosate had scorpio venom in it. I wouldn't be surprised.
Right.
And of course, glyphosate is completely saturated through the water table. So if you're eating a lot of pulses, lentils, beans, a lot of them come from in India, where the water table is saturated. So when you soak them, which you should be for 12 hours, then sprout them for 12 hours, which you should do to neutralize the phytates. Otherwise, all of your calcium, zinc, iron and magnesium will bind to it and be flushed out your body, which is why you see a lot of these vegans, they look really pasty and ill. But if you're doing that, which you're meant to do, you also will liberate a lot of the glyphosate, which is why it's good to have some sauerkraut or sauerkraut juice on the side. At the same time, there's a health tip. Because that's my passion, is nutrition and avoiding and reversing disease naturally. So yeah, I think, all of these... Dr. Max Gerson, of course, was a genius, as said by Albert Schweitzer, who was given the Nobel Prize winner. And Dr. Gerson got together with Ferdinand Sauerbruch, who was a thoracic surgeon. The Second World War had broken out, and I believe he was actually Polish. And he was the surgeon who also came up with all the artificial limbs. Anyway, they did this study on tuberculosis terminal patients, the two of them together. And I believe there was 400 or just under 400 people in their study, their cohort. And at first they were going downhill, and they discovered that one of the nurses felt sorry for them, and she was giving them beer and bratwurst and cream. And when they rectified that problem and got them only eating the foods that Dr. Gerson recommended, almost all 400 of these people survived and were recovered. And they were all terminal with TB.
Right.
That is incredible. So it wasn't quackery. And this was Ferdinand Sauerbruch and Dr. Gerson. And how did that come about? Because Dr. Gerson suffered from terrible migraines. Migraines begin in the gut-brain link. And he began to change his diet and experiment, and he cured himself. So his friend went to him and said, could you treat me? And he did, and his friend also recovered from these migraines, but he had skin tuberculosis, which healed. So this was where Albert Schweitzer went through him and said, would you treat my daughter and my wife? And he did, and they were also cured of their ailments. So this man was described as a genius ahead of his time, but of course, Dr. Gerson, whose father... he would watch his father as he would put the chemicals on the land, and all the insects would come out of the soil. And Dr. Gerson was particularly interested in the work of Professor Arnold Ehret, who was a very wealthy man, and he had a heart problem, so he had to come out of the military. And then he was very interested in photography, and he developed Bright's disease, glomerulonephritis, and he was told he was going to die, and he became very depressed. And he stopped eating. And when he stopped eating, he began to get better. So he went to Algiers and studied nutrition. And then he subsequently opened a sanitarium in Switzerland and cured thousands and thousands of people of their ailments. And in between those two, and of course, Dr. Max Gerson was very interested in his work. You had, I'm trying to remember the guy's name now, I've got his book. And he was down in New Zealand, a surgeon down in New Zealand. His name will come to me in a minute, or just pop up when I'm talking about something else. And he did the same. And he was a very handsome gigolo who rushed his patients, didn't care, smoked, drank, committed adultery. And then one day, this voice said to him, you should be ashamed of yourself. And he said, who said that, you know? And of course, he very much became a follower of Christ and completely changed his life around.
Right.
Ernst, I think his first name is Ernst. His surname
Okay.
will come to me in a minute. And he was down in New Zealand, and he's between the two. So this that's going on now is nothing new. It's all been written before. Because when we finally accept that we are part of the earth and we are all interconnected, we are all one, and if we don't treat our plants the way we should and our water the way we should, then that in turn will not feed us what we need.
Sure. Yeah.
And then, of course, your lovely lady is nodding. Then our pathways, both electrical and then chemical and physical, will all become blocked. And then we won't heal. And we'll become diseased. So it's all linked.
Yeah.
Actually, it's incredible. And if I start talking about it, I never shut up. I'll still be here next week. On and on and on and on. It's the thing that I find so fascinating, and I can never, ever learn enough. And I've just purchased a second bookcase because my bookcases are completely full. And this is what I buy books. And everyone goes, what book are you reading? I go, all of them all at once. And I always have. I've got several different copies of the Bible because, of course, everything that's written in these books, it's written in Scripture. It's already there. It's all there. How to leaven your bread, how to treat the land. The life is in the blood. Why we shouldn't have blood transfusions. The Jehovah's Witnesses were indeed right.
Yeah. Yeah.
We shouldn't have organs from other people. We shouldn't get to the point where we need someone's organ. It's not necessary. Everybody wave at the helicopter. I mean, I should imagine that the cops in the control room, when I took the pee, everybody wave at the helicopter. I mean, for them in the control room to see 40,000 people waving at them, they must have been like, we're going to nail her. Somebody had started wielding a knife and he'd intervened. He'd got his wife and child there and he was and they stabbed him and he literally died. But they do this ridiculous test. It's like theatre. And yet we're supposed to believe that that's the only way they can test.
If you'd like to buy signed prints of any of the paintings from the series, you can go to jakefern.com or go to jakefern.co.uk to see my personal work. You can message me about the possibility of commissioning a portrait for yourself or a loved one. We also have Righteous Brothers work available in unlimited and limited edition prints. Perfect for anyone who wants the world to know what they think about what's going on.